Okay, hi, this is Steve from QuikSeps Color Separation Software, and today I'm going to discuss how to print separations done within Adobe Photoshop using Adobe Illustrator to output the separations with. Now in this demonstration, we're assuming that you have a RIP for your inkjet printer. If you don't have a RIP, these techniques will not work, okay? I do have a video on ultraceps.com that goes into detail on how to output halftone separations done using Photoshop directly from Photoshop to an inkjet printer without the use or added expense of a RIP. But in this video, we're going to assume you have a RIP, as most printers usually do have one. Now here we have four different examples of the same separation. We have one that just contains the channels used within the separation. We have one that has an RGB channel that everything is white, or actually there's just no data there. We have a normal RGB channel, which is the original art itself. And then we have the same file, but we changed the color of the underbase and the highlight to a very light gray. If I double click that, you'll see that I double clicked I clicked the color chip there, and you see I changed it from an absolute white to a very washed out gray, and I'll get to that later on why this was done. But for now, let's go to Adobe Illustrator, and there's two ways to bring your artwork from Photoshop into Adobe Illustrator. One way would be opening the PSD, the Photoshop file with Illustrator, and the other would be placing that PSD document into a pre-existing template or blank file, whatever you want to call it. Okay. First we'll do is we'll open a file directly into Adobe Illustrator. So let's choose File, Open, and we're going to open the separation that has its normal regular RGB channels. Okay, we'll just click OK, and bang, it's on your screen. Now when you open a file, if you look in your Layers palette, each channel in your file will be represented as a layer. That is the main difference between opening a separation in Illustrator and placing a separation into a template or a pre-existing document. Okay. When you open it, you're going to see all these layers. When you place it, you're not. You're just going to see one layer, one composite layer, although all your spot channels are there. Now, when you do open a separation, I'd like to point out that if, well, let's turn off this RGB, everything else too for that matter, and let's turn on the white underbase channel. Now you're not going to see anything there. Okay, we've turned on the white highlight. You're not going to see anything there. However, if you turn on the black, you're going to see the black ink, you're going to see the red ink, you're going to see the yellow ink, but you don't see the white underbase or the white highlight white. And that is because Illustrator cannot show white. Okay, it sees the white underbase as transparency. However, rest assured that the information is actually there, and the white underbase will print. However, it will not preview within Illustrator, and even the effects of like the highlight white on top of where it should be, that's not going to preview either. All right, so just don't trust the preview in Illustrator too much. Okay, and now to print this image, you would just go to File, Print, and you would make sure that your correct printer PPD here is selected. Okay, make sure it's the one from your RIP. Now I have two here. Okay, I have an Epson Photo 1400 series. That is the default Epson driver. The Epson Photo Stylus 1400 is the PostScript driver. So make sure you have everything selected correctly. And the first thing you want to do is go to Output, and you're going to want to make sure that you change this to Separations Host Based. Okay? Once you select that, you'll be able to adjust what inks print, the frequency, the angle, dot shape, and so on and so forth. But what's going to happen is cyan, magenta, yellow, and black is always going to be selected. So you want to turn those four colors off. And then each of the colors that you intend to print, you're going to have to change the line frequency, angle, and dot shape. So for argumental sake, we'll choose 55 lines for the black, an angle of 26 degrees, and dot shape. You could go with line or ellipse. I'm sorry, with ellipse or dot. I've been using dot all my life. I think that the ellipse thing is a little bit of a myth. And you'll have to do this with each one of the colors in your separation. You'll have to change all of these variables. And that's it. When you get to that point, you could just click print, and that, depending upon how your RIP works, it'll most likely send the data to your RIP, and then that data will go from your RIP to your printer, and everything will all print correctly with these settings on the screen, and not whatever your RIP is set at. Okay, now let's just hit cancel here, and now let's open up a file. I'm sorry, let's place a file, and I want to show you the difference. So let's go to File, New, and here's a little tip for you. Let's choose templates. It's a good idea to make yourself some templates. Now I have just one sample here on this computer. It's an 8.5 by 11 template with register marks. Okay, so when I open that up, okay, I have a nice template with register marks in here, and these register marks, as long as all of the fills and lines are done using the color registration right here, these will print on each color of your separation. Okay, so let's give you an example here. So if I click that line in the registration mark, you'll see that the color is registration. Okay, so if you want to make yourself some templates one of these days for some different film sizes, so on and so forth, make up some neat little registration marks. I happen to like using marks like this at the corner and the little star in the middle. This has worked well for me over the years. This is the kind I've used. Okay, so now we're going to place a file into here. So let's go to File, Place, and let's go to our test images. I believe that's where we had them, and let's go with the same file here. And bang. Now that's placed right in the center of the document. Now here's the difference between placing and open. Number one, when you go to your layers palette, you're only going to see one layer. Now the layers under here, these are just grouped layers for my registration marks. But here's the image, and the image doesn't contain any layers that represent each color in the separation. If we go back to the file that we chose using the open command, all of the colors are visible as layers. However, when we place a document, that's not the case. It's just going to place it with that RGB composite image visible. However, all of the colors are there in your separation. Okay? If we look down here, here's all of your spot colors that were brought in. So now if we go to File, and we go to Print, go to Output, make sure Separation Host Based is selected. We turn off the process colors on the top, and you'll see that all those spot colors are there. So this will print exactly the same and exactly as accurately as the file that you did open, where it showed all of the channels as a layer. So it really doesn't matter the way you do it. And placing or opening these files will work, I believe, going back to Illustrator CS3. However, I don't think CS3 or CS4, when opening a separation, will present each channel in a layer. I think that it works the same as as placing into CS5, CS6, Creative Cloud, and Creative Cloud 2014, and most likely beyond. Okay, now one last thing I want to go over, and this one we get a lot, okay, and that is an error when trying to open or place a document, a separation in Adobe Photoshop. And this one is very important, so pay careful attention to this. Now let's go to File, and let's go to Open. And now let's choose the file that has no RGB channels. So that's Shaver Vintage Seps No RGB. Let's double click that, and now you're going to get an error. It's going to say unsupported color mode or depth. Only RGB, CMYK, grayscale, and bitmap are supported. Okay. So what this means is that Illustrator does not know how to read a multi-channel file from Photoshop without some sort of composite RGB or CMYK data included. So how do we fix that? Well, let's go back to Photoshop. Okay, now I believe here is the file that has no RGB channels. Okay, now what we'll need to do is add RGB channels to this file in order for it to work. Now how to do that is there's a little icon down here at the bottom of the channels palette. This will create a new channel. Click this 3 times. Okay, now it doesn't matter what these channels are called, what color they're assigned to, if they're alpha channels, if they're spot channels, it doesn't matter. Once you create those 3 channels, drag them one at a time above all of the spot channels in your separation. Okay? Now, as I said, it doesn't matter what type of channel they are. If we double click on one to bring up the channel options, these could be spot channels, selected areas, masked areas, alpha 1, it could be named, Fred Flintstone, it doesn't matter. The color of the channel itself, the opacity, it doesn't matter. Okay? Once these 3 channels are at the top of your channels palette, just go to Image, Mode, and select RGB color. And what that does is that just converted those 3 alpha channels to a composite RGB channel. And your separation is still there. And now let's save this as something with another name. So let's save this as Edit RGBs. Okay? Now let's go back to Adobe Illustrator. And let's try to open that file. Now let's go to Open, and we're going to open the Edit RGB. And bing, we're opened up just fine. Okay? And this is the RGB channel on the bottom. It contains no data at all. However, Adobe Illustrator needed to see this RGB. Okay? Without it, it's just not going to open. Now you will also notice that with a blank RGB channel, it's going to appear washed out because Adobe Illustrator is not going to compensate as much, for the dot gain and so on and so forth that Photoshop is going to do with the UltraSeps color settings and so on and so forth. Plus, additionally, Illustrator does preview the separations a little bit differently than Photoshop does. So don't expect it to look exactly the way it does in Photoshop. By all means, trust the Photoshop screen preview and just really pay no attention to your Illustrator preview. We're just using Illustrator here as a print engine. Okay, there's one other thing I'd like to touch on again that I did mention earlier in the video, and that's when you open a Photoshop color separation in Adobe Illustrator and the separation contains white ink. And as I mentioned earlier, Adobe Illustrator cannot see that white ink, although it is there, and these channels will print. Although some printers are a little bit paranoid about that, and they like to see some data in these white channels. So how do we fix that? Well, let's go back to Photoshop. And I have a version of the separation here where I've made a minor adjustment to the underbase and highlight white channels. And let me double click the channel here, which will bring up the spot channel options box. And the color itself I've changed from white to a very, very light powder gray. So if I click the chip, you'll see that the color of the channel now is actually RGB 220 across the board, which is a very, very light gray, and it's not absolute white. So now let's open up this file using Adobe Illustrator. Go to File, Open, and let's see, we were in here, and that file I believe is called Seps Color Base. Click OK. Now this is going to look a little darker since we actually have some visible color within the underbase and within the highlight white. So now let's turn everything off. Now if we turn on the highlight white, now you can rest assured that there is in fact data there and it will print. Same thing with the highlight white. It's hard to see on the video because there's not much highlight white in there, but rest assured it is visible on the screen. And this prints just like all of the other examples that we've done in the past. Now, for me personally, I rather would work with a document placed into Illustrator as opposed to opening a Photoshop file and having all these layers. And the primary reason behind that is the ability to use a predefined template like we did earlier. So if we go to File, New, and we click the little Templates button here. Okay, now as I said earlier, we only have one in here, but I have many other templates on another system that I don't have this recording software on. And you can make yourself, a half a dozen or so different templates, different sizes with different register marks and maybe other information. And this way, when you place your file, everything is set. So let's go back to File. Let's go to Place. And let's go to our original separation. And, bang, it's right there. It's all on one layer. Now, you're going to see some layers underneath. These are just grouped layers for the register marks, but there are no layers for your separation. What you're basically seeing here, well, what you are seeing here is the RGB, okay, for the artwork itself. Although, as we mentioned earlier, previously in the video, the colors are there, but you really don't need to see all of the spot colors as layers in the layers palette. As long as they're brought in with the piece of artwork, you're much better off outputting your separations using this method here. And I think it's neater, it's cleaner, and it also gives you that opportunity to have a lot of these stock templates to choose from. So once again, if we go to File and we go to Print and we go to Output and we go to Separations, you'll see all the colors are there. Okay, nothing has changed. So as I said, my opinion, do it this way. Because if you start selecting the register marks and crop marks that are a part of Illustrator, they are more or less engineered for the offset printing business. They're not made for screen printing. You're going to want something bigger and bolder, and you're definitely going to want register marks that you could customize. So that's about it. That's how you would use Adobe Illustrator to print your Photoshop separations from. And I believe this is going to work exactly the same way, beginning with Adobe Illustrator CS3. Although if you do open a separation with CS3 or CS4, you're not going to get any layers. Okay, if you open or place, I believe that in CS3 or CS4, all of your data is just going to be there, and the preview is the RGB itself. I think that the option to open a Photoshop separation and to have each individual channel of the separation viewable as a layer began with began with Illustrator CS5. And that's about it. I know this was very rudimentary. It's very simple, but there's a lot of printers out there who are just getting started that are unaware of a lot of these things. So that's why I need to post these videos. Hopefully it's helped a few of you, and I'll see you next time. Thanks a lot.